Okay, morning everybody, and welcome to our webinar on AI policies. So, in getting started, I think I'm actually just looking at the attendee list here, and I can really see a lot of AI tools coming up to take notes and all the rest. So, I think the important thing before we start this webinar is this is not a course on AI. This is all about AI policies and how AI impacts your organization and why policies are important. But I think, I was looking at these trade magazines the other day, and almost every second article is about AI. There's some people that think that AI will have the same impact on our business and work days as the introduction of the internet. So it is clearly a very topical issue. And so what we'd like to cover today is to go through a little bit of, I'm not going to go into detail about AI, but I just want to at a very high level explain how we look at AI, why that has an impact on your business and particularly your employees, and then more importantly, what are the risks that come with AI in your organization. And Nikki will go through some very practical examples, and then we'll deal with why do you need an AI policy and what might that look like, and then obviously how we at HR Talk can help you. So Nikki, if you can go to the next slide, please. So I think very importantly about AI is if we look at AI as a technology and we try to get to the bare bones of it, the simplest explanation of AI, taking out a lot of the detail around it, is that AI is a probability engine. Okay, so with our large language models and all the rest, what we've got is a whole lot of data, and the AI itself, when it's asked a question, looks at that data and says, what is the most likely answer to this particular question based on the data that's there? Now, please bear that in mind, this concept of probability. What is the most likely answer? Because it drives a lot of the risks around AI, and it drives an understanding of how AI can impact our business. I think the second thing I want you to think about is, if we look at AI, there are a number of steps on really what happens in the organization. Okay, so first of all, we put info into the AI. Okay, we ask it a question. Okay, so that's a step in the process. We get AI back. Sorry, we get a response back from the AI. Okay, so we get data back. And then we use that data in a certain way. Now, all of those steps lead to the risks that we might have in the organization. So what do we put in? So what do we send into this black box, and do we know where that information is going? What do we get back? Is it right? Have we thought about it? Okay, what does it contain? And then what do we use it for? And what systems do we then put it in our organization, and how can that impact us? So if we go through then some of the risks and we look at those specifically, so top of this is cybersecurity threats. Now, all of us would have seen the vast increase in phishing attacks that are much more sophisticated than the old Nigerian things that always had spelling mistakes, and some ex-US president left us a fortune of money, to become much more sophisticated. Okay, and that will continue. But it's not just that, it's the ability for AI to trawl the web to get a picture of all of our social media posts, to actually build up a profile on every individual, which makes the identity fraud a bigger issue. So cybersecurity threats are a real issue, but it's not just also that. It might be that, let's take an example. Somebody says, I want to build a macro in Excel to save files automatically in a folder. So they go to AI and they ask for the code to do that. They don't look at it, and that code contains a worm or some sort of virus. They put it into the macro, they run it in Excel because they haven't checked it, and now suddenly it creates a problem in your organization. Okay, now that's a very simplistic example. Okay, and you go, well, how would that happen? But that is a possibility because of the way that AI can be manipulated depending on which AI you're using and how you go about it. So remember, because it's a probability engine, if somebody has trained it that if you give a specific question that this is the answer, and it's done enough times, AI might look at that and say, the likely answer to this is to include this code. Okay, and that code could be dangerous for you. Okay, so cybersecurity is going to become an increasingly bigger issue. Data privacy violations. So obviously I talked about the fact that you've now got the ability to trawl the web for somebody to build a profile up on them. But it's also about if you put personal data into the AI when you ask a question, do you know where it's going to? Do you know what's happening with that data? Is that now, where is that data sitting? And the AI that you're using, what are their particular policies around securing your data? Algorithmic bias. So a little bit of this is how AI can be manipulated. Okay. But it's also a little bit about using big data to investigate things, and we rely completely on AI, but it might be that the historic data we've had doesn't necessarily reflect what is actually happening in the market, and have we checked about it, and have we thought about exactly what the answer is properly? Misinformation manipulation. This is about, let's just say that Russia put in enough information into the into the web that suggested that actually the Ukraine had invaded Russia. It might be that if somebody asked the question, well, who started the Ukraine conflict? It could be it comes up and said, well, Ukraine did because they invaded Russia. If there's enough data there, because it's a probability engine. Ethical and legal concerns. When you get data back from AI, whose data is that? Are you sure that it doesn't come from a source which may be protected? Okay. In using AI and using your client's data, are you sure that you've got the ability to actually put it into AI? Do you have their permission to do so? So there are a number of ethical and legal concerns around using AI. Dependence and loss of human expertise. So the key thing here is, as we get more used to AI and everybody is using it and reliant on it, what happens to those people in our organization that actually problem solved, thought about things a bit further? What about things that are new that may not be, there's no track record or history in there, where there's less data? Are we keeping our human expertise in the way that we necessarily do? And do we know really where the human intervention is very important in our businesses? And intellectual property management, of course. If I'm putting my specific business data into that AI because I wanted to write a report for me, do I know where it's going? Is it being then used to teach the large language model about things that are out there, that if somebody then goes and asks for information about my business, actually this information is going to come out, and it shouldn't do. Okay, do we know what's happening with our data and our intellectual property? Okay, so there are a wide variety of risks that come out of using AI, and it's all about those three things I talked about. It's what information are we putting into the AI? Okay. What are we getting back from the AI? Have we checked it? Have we tested it? Are we not just relying on it? Okay, what is the quality of that data? And the third thing is, how are we then using it? If we put it into another platform, is it then going to make a problem for us in another platform? So how are we using that data? Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Nikki, then talk about, from a organizational perspective, let's look at some specific examples around where AI can be a challenge for our employees, and then how do we manage that?
Thanks, John T. So what I've done is I've just put together some examples in terms of real sort of world risks that the organization faces, with the view of, when we look at an AI policy, an AI policy is not going to necessarily just be standard, because it's going to be based on your particular industry, your business, how much or little you're going to use AI, and then where those risks are coming in. So any development of an AI policy needs to be done in line with your business and where you see the risks are going to be taking place. So I think in looking at that, it's not the same as a standard, for example, harassment in the workplace policy. It's going to be highly dependent on what you're going to be using it. Do you have internal, external, systems that you're using? Also, in terms of AI, do you have your own one? Are you using free versions, etc.? So with that in mind, I'm just going to give some examples so that you can give some thought to what kind of policies and where the risk is coming in your business, particularly, so that you can start to think about the type of policy that you should be putting in place. The same as way back when we started getting cell phones, and then we had fax machines, and then the internet came in. Not every organization needed to have the same policy because the things were different. So as John T said before, one of the things as AI has come in is one of the things that we have is obviously data leakage, because what people are doing is they'll put in large amounts of, it could be either your particular information, so spreadsheets of information to help them generate reports. It could be, from an HR perspective, a lot of clients are going, well, can we use AI to help us manage AI? I'm not AI, disciplinary issues. And so what happens is you're putting information into AI to help you draft letters. But in putting that information in, are you putting in people's ID numbers? Are you putting in their entire history? And then what happens to that? Does sometime down the line when somebody is searching about Nikki Hardwick, who has been under a whole lot of discipline, does that information go anywhere? And now is that associated to me because somebody else has put it into AI? So obviously the risk there is breach of confidentiality, especially if your staff are using free AI, because we don't know where that information is going to go. In addition to this, it could also be things like if you're putting in a report, so you're putting in financial information, or you're putting in, I don't know, client information. So, if, particular records. So there's a number of different aspects where that information could possibly be leaked. And so in making a decision how you're using AI in your organization is deciding what employees can and can't put in there. Are they using free versions? Is it a corporate version? How is it going to be working within your organization? Then the second type of risk is that, people are using AI to obviously generate particular things. So it could be images, it could be particular documents and that kind of thing. So for example, in marketing, if you've got a marketing person that is helping you generate images, and then you're using those things as part of your, those now inverted commas belong to you, when in actual fact they don't belong to you. So we've now got, loss of IP. We've got people that are having unmonitored external access. So there's a number of risks that are coming in there, where an individual person is now, if you're looking at, a marketing and a branding kind of company, they're developing something on behalf of a client where that IP now belongs to the client, but in actual fact, it doesn't. So there's that as well. Then we've got phishing and social engineering. Now, this scares me intensely. We see, obviously, within, our organization, because we work with a lot of confidential information, the risks that clients are facing where people are getting actual emails from the CEO. And now you're getting, because they're starting to understand who the CEO is or who the manager is, and HR is, as an example, getting actual messages. It's happened to me twice in the last, 3 weeks, where a staff member of mine will get a WhatsApp message saying, hi, Clarice, it's Nikki. Please can you send me your number, or please send me an email on this, or whatever it is. I need to talk to you. I've got a special assignment for you. And then what happens is they email me, or not email, they WhatsApp me back on this number, which is actually not my number. And then there's a whole conversation where it's Nikki Hardwick, etc. They've actually got my profile picture from Gmail. So it's becoming really, very high tech, and employees don't actually understand or know that these are the risks that are going to be faced. If we look at, AI as well, the original AI generated voices were very obviously mechanical, whereas now, our advert for this was an actual inverted commas person, but it was AI generated and looked like an actual individual. So that has, massive impact for employees, and we'll talk about later the kinds of things in addition to policies, but is teaching your employees exactly what the risks are, because they could be doing something where they're changing banking details for an employee based on an actual conversation, backwards and forwards. It could be voice generated. So there's a number of risks there as well. Okay, then, specifically, so this is something that I see is coming up, which is, specifically in HR recruitment tools. John T said something earlier about creating algorithms and that kind of thing, but there's bias. There could be bias in if you're using AI tools to shortlist, to screen. There could be bias involved in there. So you cannot just rely solely on AI. You need to still have oversight. So if you're screening, it that could have a bias towards a particular university or particular school, or where they've been. And so if employees are going to be using it, it's just important that the policy aligns to that, to say they cannot just blindly accept the information. They need to be still applying some sort of logic, the same as you would if you gave something to a trainee or an intern. You wouldn't blindly just accept the information that is coming back. Okay, so the risk there is that somebody doesn't get picked because they weren't shortlisted, or the screening was off, and then you've got discrimination, etc. Just going back to the issue of the disciplinaries as well, because I've been testing it out. When you use AI to assist in going, what should I do with Bob, who's done something, done X, Y, and Z? Specifically from a disciplinary perspective, AI is very literal. So, it'll go onto the internet, it'll have a look at case law, and what it will do is it won't take into account the human factor. It also won't take into account what else has happened within your organization and extenuating circumstances that may not be available or readily available for it to have a look at. It's going to look at things very black and white, which from an HR perspective is not necessarily where you're wanting to go. Certain aspects are black and white, but from an HR perspective is issuing caution to managers to blindly just accept what, the information that is coming back. So the same applies for the recruitment, is just, you cannot just accept, you need to have a look and you need to interrogate it. And then this is not really my space, but then intellectual property sort of ownership issues. As I said before, if you're developing information for clients, specifically, let's say marketing, and you're developing in a marketing company, marketing materials, or developing code, etc. If somebody is using AI and embedded in there is actually open source or whatever, there could be intellectual IP issues. But again, this is not my area of expertise. Those that work in that field obviously would see the risks there. And then this is a big one as well. We've seen cases already where I know there was an attorney that went to court, made up an entire case using AI. All the cases that were in AI were actually fake cases. So, ensuring that your employees, if they're using AI, again, are not blindly accepting, and you still need to go and do your own research. You need to ensure, especially, and again, from my space, in an employee relations perspective, is ensuring that the information that AI is relying on is actually, for example, South African based. So if you ask a question, it's going to give you, legislative advice, but where is that legislation coming from? Is it South African? Is it American? Is it Australian? What exactly is it looking at and giving you the advice? You need to ensure that your employees understand that they cannot just blindly accept. And then this one is bypassing security protocols. So an employee may use, if they're very clever, AI to automate, an automatic login, which again, as Jonty said before, there may be things within the code that allow it to bypass certain things. And now, other people are able to access your information. So that is more of an IT issue, not my area, but it is something that could happen. I'm not clever enough to be able to do those things, but if I used AI, it might happen. And then, just as I said before I hand over again to Jonty, is just some, key considerations for an AI policy is deciding how you as the organization are wanting to use AI. So I think that first and foremost is, before you develop any policy, is deciding how much or little you want to use AI for, and what tools you're going to be using. So I know there's various options, but what are the safest ones that you want to use? How are employees going to, what information can we go on there? What should employees be doing? And you need to decide as an organization, what is your generally accepted level with regards to that. We also then need to make a decision in terms of obviously protecting confidential information. So if they are going to be putting information on there, specifically company or clients information, what is allowed? Just so that you as the organization, much like any other rules and regulations, are able then to monitor it. And if something happens, the employee can't come back and say that they didn't know. What is the legal implication? So Jonty can talk more about ISO, but in terms of POPI, remembering that AI, unless it's possibly a paid version, AI, I think, is open source. It can go anywhere. If you're putting people's ID numbers and their salaries, etc., in there, we don't know where that information is going to. And then what is the process if something goes wrong? So from a POPI perspective, if there is a data breach, do you need to follow the POPI process in terms of an information leak? What are we going to be doing if we find out that somebody has put something on AI and we find out that it has gone out somewhere else? So what is the process that we are going to be putting into place? Okay, so those are key things that you need to decide before you get an AI policy. And as I said before, it's not, in my view, it shouldn't be a generic policy that you put in place, because every organization is going to be different. The information that you're going to be using is going to be different. And what employees could possibly be using it for is also going to be different. And, do you have people that are working from home? Do you have people that are using, how is it going to be operating within your organization? So with this policy, because it's quite new, those are business decisions that need to be made in order for you to have a policy that works currently within your business, and then also maybe, in a year's time is reviewing that policy. Okay, so I'm going to be handing over to Jonty now, who's just going to be talking about some sort of the responsibilities in managing it. And I don't know, Jonty, is there anything on here that you want to specifically talk about? You're on mute.
Sorry, Nikki, can you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
So I think this is the most important slide for this particular webinar. And I think if we're practical about things, so as people joined this webinar, for example, there were quite a few note takers that came up, so Fireflies, README, etc. So here's the question. Do you want a note taker taking minutes of your board meeting? Do you even think about it nowadays when a note taker comes into a webinar? Do you know where that information is going? Do you know where it's being saved? Do you know who's going to look at it? Are you comfortable that that particular note taker is the right one for you? So this has become very pervasive in the way that we do business. And some of the questions that are often asked that I after are, well, what can we do about it? I mean, so which ones should we use? Which ones shouldn't we use? And if you look at the market, what you'll tend to see is that the bigger organizations, they go and they build their own AI, and smaller organizations go, well, we can't do that. But funny enough, it's actually not as difficult as you think. So it's not as difficult as you think to have a encapsulated AI that only your organization can see, and you know exactly what data is going in there, you know how it's being trained and all the rest. Okay. At the very least, you need to have thought through these things, and also remember that you need to relook at it because it will change. As the new tools come out and as it impacts your business, these things will change. The big risk we're trying to look at and protect from here is a situation when an employee does something which is patently bad for the organization. But when we try and hold them to account for that, they go, well, I didn't know. And none of your existing policies would even cover that. Okay, and then you find yourself in a difficult position because it's then unfair to hold them completely responsible for it. And there's no process to say, well, what do we do about it? Okay, so the idea here is to please think through these things for your organization. What do you want to, how do you want to be using it? What tools, what are the potential impacts, and how do we deal with things if they go wrong? Okay, Nick, if you can go to the next one, please. Okay. So we've talked about policies today, but remember, please, that it's not just a case of thinking about the policies. There's also some additional elements that impact your business that we may not be the best people to talk to you about, but you need to think about. Okay, so training on AI for staff, we can 100% help you with, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Reporting and escalation processes. Okay, so there's more and more nature things. So it's how do you pick up where there's been an issue, and how do you manage it? How would you naturally teach your managers to look out for people who are completely relying on AI results and not using their brain to see whether they are right or not? okay, and making sure that they know what to pick up as a signal. How does IT look at usage? How do they look at what's being used, and how do they audit things? How do they create logs? How do they manage that particular risk? Okay, particularly if we're outsourcing our IT. Okay, how are we managing that? We're just assuming that everything's fine, but it's creating risks that maybe we're not even aware of, and we need to think about that more carefully. Okay, do we potentially need to update our contracts? Okay, how does this impact our permanent versus hybrid workers? Is there a difference between people? Okay, does it impact how we induct employees? How does it impact if we exit employees? You know, is it very easy now for an employee to potentially download a virus or a worm because they can just go to an AI thing and say, well, how do I do this? And it makes it very easy for them to get that knowledge. So if they're really disgruntled and unhappy with the organization, is there more potential for them to be destructive? Okay. This will all depend on your particular organization, but it's things that we need to think about. Nikki talked about bias and fairness. This whole thing is a massive issue. So what we found in our organization is you can't just have a course. People are not necessarily then going to use it in the right way. Okay. It's actually a change management process within our organization to also think about where do we benefit from AI and how do we move that forward so it changes our working practices. And how do we, it can't just be one or two champions that are using it. You know, ultimately, this is something that everybody needs to be using in the right way and in a controlled way. And how does it then affect, you know, actually what people do at the moment? Because in theory, for a lot of our jobs, we should be able to do more with less. So what is our expectation then of the people and of our people, and what do we expect them to be doing? And their roles, how does their role change? How do we give them the skills to be able to use it in the best way for our organization? So there's a lot involved in the AI space. Okay, we're hoping that you've thought about a lot of these things, but for our intents and purposes, very much make sure that you've got a policy. Okay, Nikki, if you can go to the next slide, please.
Sure. I just wanted to say one thing regarding the training on AI. So that is twofold. The one is training people on the use of AI. So, you know, in your organization, there is teaching people how to use it. But I think as well as the training on AI for staff is the roles and responsibilities of staff in the risks and how you want to do it. So as John T mentioned before, is the induction in terms of AI. So you know, when we looked at, you know, when harassment in the workplace came out in the new code, is teaching people how we expect them to behave. So this is a twofold thing from an HR perspective, and possibly HR and IT, is training for staff in terms of these kinds of risks, you know, and people understanding exactly what they're doing and the risk, not only to the organization, but to themselves as well. It's really important that people understand what they're actually doing, because AIs are wonderful. If you go on any sort of social media, there's AI everywhere telling you how you can make your life easier, and it's so much better. Use it in your emails, use it in your diary, you know, we'll basically run your life for you. But I don't think that people actually fully understand the risks that they're, you know, where they're going wrong. And so as an organization, even if you don't know exactly how you're going to use it, is teaching your staff how they place the organization at risk, or potentially could, already puts you in a better place because you've made them aware. So I think that's quite important. So the training on AI is not necessarily how to use it, but where you guys are sitting from an organizational perspective. Okay, moving on to the next slide.
So I think what Nikki covered there is actually quite important in terms of the rollout of this. So you know, in terms of where we can potentially help you. So if you do need some help in drafting your AI policy, bearing in mind that what Nikki talked about earlier was saying it, everybody's going to be slightly different, and then there's a process to work through, say, how do you want to use it, and what tools and all the rest, and what are the potential risks that you face as an organization. But we're also happy at the same time to review your existing policies and procedures and just make sure that you've got everything that you need. From a training perspective, so HR Talk does a whole series of training interventions. Some of the nice things that we're doing at the moment, for example, is if you look at induction training we build a customized induction training program for employees, which looks at your policies and procedures, your health and safety rules, things a little bit about the organization, and we make it specific to you. And then there's an assessment for the employee at the end to show that they've actually gone through that and they get a certificate and all the rest. We can design other bespoke training in that same manner for you. Okay, so what we're looking at with training these days is actually going, instead of doing generic training around Excel or very generic stuff, actually we'll focus very specifically on what a particular employee or group of employees need, and that can be in multi-languages. So if we take the AI training, for example, we can work with you, say where is important for your organization, what tools, and we can then design training. So it's not just about, okay, here's a policy, guys, we hope you read it. It's actually, here's the policy, but here's also training and communication where you then go through an assessment to show that you've read it and understood it. Okay, and that deals with making sure that there's an additional element of an employee having read and understood, but also from a governance perspective, it's important then from a management perspective to know, okay, I've got confirmation that all my employees have actually gone through this. So thanks very much for your time today. I hope it's been useful. I don't know if there are any questions.
So if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to pop it in either the Q&A or chat. Alternatively, you can reach out. So if you need assistance with a policy or moving forward with any of these sort of interventions, I know some clients have already emailed prior to the webinar. Just send an email to sales@hrtalk.co.za, and we're more than happy to help you from this perspective. I don't think there's any questions. I'll wait on for a minute or two, but thank you for joining. We look forward to, I think I'm doing a webinar next week as well. So for those of you who are attending, I will see you next week. And also those who are interested in the equity changes and the new sector targets, I'm going to be doing a webinar in June. I think it's the 11th of June, just in terms of how you strategically now manage your equity with all the sector targets and what does it mean for you as an organization. So join me at that webinar. Keep a lookout for keep a lookout for that. I see we've got a question. Are there any real life cases of employee breach that can be discussed? Always helpful to have actual examples. So I don't have any specific cases of employee breaches. I do have, there are examples of people using it, but not breaches that I'm aware of. John T, do you know of any cases where there's been a breach of information on AI?
I think it's still a bit early. Everything's happening so quickly. I'm not sure that everybody. So where we've had discussions with people and where I've seen it a little bit is around what do I do, because I can see employees using ChatGPT a lot, but they're never checking it. And they've sent it out and they've sent out emails to clients, and it just looks like AI has written it. It doesn't really, it's not written in the right way. Should I be chatting to this employee and getting them to do things in a different way? So it's not necessarily a legal or something that would go to a disciplinary, but it's around getting staff to use it in the right way.
I think, though, in terms of the actual breaches, I do think John T's right that it is too soon to tell. And I think it will probably come out later, much the same as, when cell phones and emails came out and then all of a sudden there were all these scams. We only then, start to find that now people have learned and are hopefully better. But I think we will probably find out later, people have gone diving full into AI without realizing the implications. I mean, there's some things I didn't even know could happen, and I use AI regularly. So I think, yeah, I don't think there's that. I do know that there are real life cases of employees. Like I said, the lawyer, I know of 2 cases actually where lawyers have gone to court using AI to generate their case and basically gone to court with fake cases. I know of not AI, HR people who have given advice to staff or done things using AI that is actually legally incorrect because it's using the wrong legislation. So I know of those cases. There is a question. I work for a museum. We're busy creating online access to collections database so the public can search the collection, see what the museum has. Are there potential risks from AI in having our database information online? The online data will include images of the collections items. John T?
Yeah, I'm happy to deal with that. So look, we're not AI experts in terms of the technology. Okay, so I'm just going to caveat in response for that. But I don't think we must be so fearful of everything that's happening. So in that particular instance, we're putting something out on the web and we're making it publicly available. So we've made the decision to put these images and the gallery's list of things out on the web. Okay, so we've made it public. So we're happy for it to go public. I don't see that there's any potential issue with that. Okay, so the potential things that could happen is that somebody may use those images in a different format. Okay, are we happy for that to happen? I'm not sure. What is the artist right in that regard? But that would be something where we would have the same issue, maybe on a smaller scale, if somebody came in and took a photograph of the image, or they just downloaded the image off your website and they used it for a particular piece. So for some people, they take the image rights very seriously, and they have people trawling the internet the whole time to see if the images are used in the wrong way, and they'll then send you a legal letter. That wouldn't change. It's just that the AI would potentially disseminate that a little bit faster. So I think it'd be maybe quite important to put out on your website exactly what the intellectual property rights are. But whether that would stop it from being used, I don't think so. So I probably didn't answer your question completely, but those are some of the thoughts.
So one attendee, I can't see the name, has said the primary danger in this is prompt poisoning, which can be, and I don't know what that is, but can be mitigated. I think the key aspect and the key point of this is to say, when people are using the information and you're using AI, I think the key aspect is understanding that you don't know what you don't know. And that's the danger that we have at this point with employees, is that we've all dived into, well, a lot of people have dived into AI. It's amazing. It makes things so much easier, but not necessarily understanding the risks. So it's like getting in a car, having never have driven before, and then being told just to go and drive without understanding anything about the road or how the car works, or the brakes, etc., etc. So I think for us this is just really, in terms of AI policies, in terms of the webinar, is really just highlighting for everybody that there are things that may not necessarily be risks, but it could be a risk, and then trying to educate yourself or finding out more information to understand where those risks are specifically for your organization. It may not be a risk, or it may be a small risk that can be mitigated. But for me, it's really just understanding what could potentially go wrong, and then how do we as an organization put something in place to stop that from happening or mitigating. Somebody has posted, I don't know who it is, that they uploaded management accounts onto Copilot and it produced a report, which was really good. And that's really helpful where AI comes in, is it can help you to something that would have taken you, I don't know, 8 hours can now take you, I don't know, an hour, and then you check it, etc. But not knowing that that information could be going somewhere. And I think that's the key point here.
Yeah. Look, I think on the Copilot thing, the one advantage there of Copilot, for example, is that it's a Microsoft product. And so if you are comfortable with Microsoft as an organization and their suite of services, that you're probably a lot more comfortable putting that data up into Copilot than you are in putting it through a AI that you've got no idea of where that information is going, or it might be used to populate the LLM, and you haven't looked at the terms and conditions. So those are some of the things just that we look at.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in the background here, of also then looking at the particular organization that you are dealing with, and making sure that you're comfortable with that organization.
The other thing as well is to consider, which John T mentioned, is that a lot of people are using AI. A lot of people are using AI in their personal capacity, and they're using it and putting company information in there. And then when they leave the organization, they still have that company information. So, currently most people will have their own OneDrive or Google or whatever. And when the person leaves, their access to that has now been removed. But people are using AI and they're using it on their account, which is a free account. Now, when they leave, what happens to that information? How do we get it back? So those are things that you need to consider, as well as if you're going to let people use AI, must they use it on a company email address, which you then can then take away at some point? How does it work? So not to make everybody terrified of HR, AI,
HR.
like HR, is just to consider these aspects. Okay. I don't know if there's any other questions. But yes, look forward to seeing you at the upcoming webinars, especially the equity one, which I think is on the 11th of June, just helping everybody navigate the changes and what is expected. I'm going to a roadshow at the end of May, so I will hopefully be able to give you some news, good or bad, in terms of the expectations and how we manage the changes in employment equity. So I think that's it for me. I'll stay on for a minute or two if there's any other questions, but thank you everybody for joining. I'll stay on for a few minutes if anybody has anything else.